as if London wasn't already depressing, grey and sad. But luckily we have Ethel Cain to cheer us up. Oh god.
I see snap.
Perverts, the new album from Ethel Cain. 9 songs long, running at an impressive 1.5 hours long. Something interesting about this album I need to say is that it feels like it needs to be listened to as one whole piece. Whilst I do really like it, there are a lot of songs here and there that I just wouldn't listen to by themselves. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. Ethel Cain is the stage name of Hayden Silas Anadonia. Sorry if I got that wrong. An American singer, songwriter, producer and visual artist. Musically, you can expect to hear something evocative and haunting from Ethel Cain, crafting narratives that explore themes of family, nostalgia, sadness, religion, trauma, and Southern Gothic themes, often using these themes to create a more cinematic concept in her albums. Her debut studio album and previously mentioned Preacher's Daughter in 2022 received critical acclaim for its immersive storytelling, blending genres like dream pop, folk, ambient. I think Cain's artistry here is marked by her ability to create visceral feeling and emotion, with these expansive atmospheres and melodies that can sometimes feel overwhelming. And this is something we hear in her latest release. It's somewhat darker than her previously mentioned album, and that's kind of saying something. If this was your first listen, it might be somewhat hard to grab the appeal of Ethel Cain, especially after that 12-minute intro, Perverts, and again another 3 minutes before you even start to hear something. But when you do, it's an ongoing drone. It has these intermittent moments where you hear muffled vocals, which is something that she's done all over this album. And I do wonder whether it plays into that theme of just not being heard or even ignored. As Perverts goes on, the droning gets louder and more layered, and things start to become out of tune, sounding here more like an art piece than anything. But overall, the song gives you this sense of complete unease, which ultimately turns into sadness in the following song, Punish. But again, starts with these muffled sounds that we kind of hear all over the album, which I'm sure here are open for interpretation, which sounds to me like a rocking chair or a bed, but it definitely sounds like it's coming from another room, like we shouldn't really be listening to this. We're then introduced to some simple but haunting piano melody, followed by Hayden's beautiful vocals, which has this really nice lo-fi effect on it, as if we're hearing it from a recording or something from the past. It's only until the 4-minute mark that we get to these really distorted guitars. They fade in slightly off time, it feels, which I'm sure was completely intentional, but it just sounded a bit odd to me. Again, maybe trying to push this like uncomfortable feeling that everything's slightly off. But this song has this swirl up of distortion as she slowly sings I'm punished by love, which yeah, love can often feel like a punishment, especially if it's not reciprocated or you're being taken advantage of. On to Housofpsychoticwomn, a 13.5-minute track here, which is again riddled with these distorted voices. Feeling slightly too long for me here though, even though it's essentially some layered drone sounds and an LFO going off here and there. At some point, it starts to sound like an ultrasound, which I actually found quite interesting. It was a nice change and like a bit of a surprise. At some point though, it does start to feel claustrophobic as well, especially that last minute or so with that abrasive texture, like a microphone's been left unplugged. It's this minimal idea but used really effective. And then we come to the song Vacillator, true to name with lyrics like won't lose me to thunder or lightning but you could to crowded rooms, or close the door, let me in, almost contradicting statements here. I love the way this song starts with these lazy, lone, almost sandy drums, just audible behind all this fuzz. And then as the song goes on, the sonic space slowly starts to fill up. And then the vocals come in, really making the whole space feel brighter, even though they're quite melancholic. But what I loved is this moment around the 4-minute 20 mark where the tone and music just completely almost changes. Things start to feel a little bit close. Just like the song's title, you've changed your mind or you're feeling a little bit unsure. And then everything goes back to normal, like you've just decided to stay and everything carries on as normal. I just think it was a great little piece of audio storytelling. From here though, with the song Onanist, which I had to look up the word because I have no idea what it meant, and I'm kind of glad I did. Whilst it has several meanings, I've learnt learnt the proper name for pulling out. But in this case, I believed it was used in the context of a sexual deviant. As we can kind of see in the lyrics, it's someone wanting a bit more intimacy. But there before the grace of God I go, I want to know love and I want to know what it feels like. Musically, I love this track. It's full of texture. The detuned elements add this peculiar ambience that I really enjoy, which makes me feel comfortable, but at the same time like I shouldn't be there. To be fair though, the distorted sounds in this track are a bit too generous at this point and does somewhat take away from the overall vibe. And I feel the same way about the track Thatorchia. There's at some point, there's just a bit too much distortion. And then we have another long track, Pull Over, running at 15 minutes. There's a lot of long tracks on this album, and I think that might be part of its downfall. I'm not sure. And it lost me a little bit halfway through. It's essentially just a really low hum set below all these really sort of nice, interesting string textures, but it does get a bit samey. Whilst they do feel different and they add this nice tone, I just think it's just a bit too long for me. Again, it feels like a really interesting art piece than anything. And as I said earlier, I'm not going to come back and just listen to this track. If I'm going to listen to this track, I'm going to be listening to the whole album as a whole, like as an experience. Last few tracks on the album now, starting with Etienne, which comes to us as an instrumental, which is a brilliant track. The piano, which has this detuned tail, and these slow guitar strums that come in sitting on a bed of ambience. And then you have these sound effects happening in the background, which really make this a good listen and really vibrant. The ending vocals, I'm not sure where they come from. They do feel slightly out of place, but I don't mind them. I think they kind of add this weird dreamlike state. They are almost verging on, oh, you're depressed? We'll just go outside then. And finally, we're here on the last track, Amber Waves. I'm not sure if this is a reference to the Housofpsychoticwomn plant, I think it's called. Either way, it's quite a nice song to end the album on. It feels conclusive and slightly more relieved to some of the other tension-filled tracks on the album. I think this one actually might have the most lyrics too. Again, it's very atmospheric and those electric guitars really spike through quite nicely. Is it stand out? Not massively. A lot of this album is very cohesive. And that does unfortunately mean sometimes it sounds quite the same or things just sound too similar. Even though I say that, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It just means it works as a whole. And to me, this album is slightly more than just music. Like I said earlier, there's not many songs here that I would just listen to by themselves, but as a whole, they do really come together to make a great piece of work. Sonically, it's very haunting and uneasy, putting me in a rural Gothic American setting. Does it rely heavily on grain and noise? Well, yeah, but I kind of like that. Life has surface noise. Instrumentally, it's quite minimal, but adding to that sad feeling that the album overall encompasses. And I know a lot of the songs sound minimal too, but there's a lot of layering going on. That complexity is quite hard to do sometimes, especially without making it sound overwhelming. There were moments here and there where I thought the songs were quite long. I think everything was over 5 minutes maybe, and I was losing a bit of interest here and there. But other than that, I think it was quite a solid piece of work. So with all of that, I would probably give this album a 7.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know below. Feel free to like and subscribe, whatever you like. And yeah, thank you for, joining me. I have been really ill, so sorry about the 2 weeks of absence. But yeah, for me, when I get sick, it's hard for me to recover quick because of my immune system, liver, all that blah, blah, blah. Thank you very much, and hopefully catch you on the next one. Goodbye.